From the moment you were born, a story began to be told about you. Before you could even speak, before you could form a single conscious thought, someone had already decided who you were. They gave you a name. They assigned you a nationality, a religion, a culture. They defined for you what was right and wrong, what was beautiful or ugly, what was acceptable or shameful. And little by little, you accepted all of it as if it were your most intimate truth. But what if I told you that none of this is truly yours? What if the person you believe you are, your opinions, your desires, your fears, is nothing more than a pre-manufactured mold shaped by the invisible hands of society, family, and culture? The French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre said man is nothing else but what he makes of himself. But how can one make something of oneself if, from the very beginning, your own self was already handed to you, packaged and ready for consumption? You never had the chance to ask yourself, like, who am I really? That question, simple yet devastating, is the starting point of a journey few dare to take. Because discovering who you truly are requires first the courage to face a painful truth. You are not who you think you are, and maybe you never were. The self you defend so fiercely, your certainties, your pains, your dreams, may be nothing more than an echo of other people's expectations, a construction as fragile as the walls of a sandcastle. You grew up wearing layer upon layer of borrowed identities, believing they were yours. But these masks one day begin to weigh heavily, and deep down, in the silence you avoid confronting, you feel it. Something is missing, something doesn't fit, and it is in this uncomfortable emptiness that our real story begins. It all begins silently. You learn to smile when they expect you to cry only when you are given permission, to want what everyone else wants, to dream what everyone else dreams. It's subtle, so subtle that you don't even realize that little by little, your authenticity is being silenced, replaced by echoes of expectations that were never yours, but that now feel so familiar they seem unquestionable. School tells you how to think. Family tells you who to be. Society tells you what is worth desiring. And all the while, your true voice becomes quieter and quieter. The German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche once warned, "Become who you are." But how can you become who you are if your very essence was muted from the beginning by the noise of external demands? Little by little, your life becomes a performance. You act to be accepted. You speak to be approved. You choose paths that seem yours, but are actually shortcuts someone else designed for you long before you ever had a choice. Your major decisions, career, love, dreams, may simply be the fulfillment of an invisible script, written by hands you barely even know. And the cruelest part is that when you feel unhappy, empty, or out of place, you still blame yourself. You ask, "What's wrong with me?" without realizing that perhaps the real question should be, why did I agree to carry expectations that were never mine? The Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard said that the greatest tragedy in life is to lose yourself in the process of pleasing the world. And that is exactly where many of us find ourselves now, living lives that do not resonate with our essence, prisoners in castles of expectations we built to please others. But the good news is, the echo can be silenced. The true voice can be found again. The journey back to who you are and not who they expect you to be is still possible. But this journey won't be comfortable. It will demand the breaking down of the invisible walls you've grown accustomed to. And that's where we begin talking about the deconstruction of the false self, the theme that will lead us into the next part of this journey. The deconstruction of the false self is like dismantling, piece by piece, a statue you once believed was your own flesh, every idea you accepted without question, every value you defended out of fear and not conviction, every dream you chased because it was expected, all of it must be placed under the ruthless light of doubt. You cannot rebuild your essence without first demolishing the lies that have been piled upon it. René Descartes, the father of modern thought, began his famous process of radical doubt by asking, "What can I know for certain?" He decided that anything that could be doubted, even slightly, must be discarded. And it is this same courage you need now to look at every aspect of your identity and ask mercilessly, is this truly mine? Did this arise from within me, or was it implanted in me? As you ask these questions, something curious begins to happen. Many of the certainties that seemed unshakable begin to crumble. The political opinions you defended as absolute truths, the life preferences you believed were genuine, even your greatest fears. You realize much of it was never truly yours. They were inheritances, programming, fragments of other minds infiltrated into yours. And this realization hurts, because deconstructing the false self is like grieving a loss. You must say goodbye to the version of yourself that was your shield, your mask, your companion throughout an entire lifetime. But at the same time, this pain is the harbinger of freedom, for only those willing to die to who they were can be reborn into who they truly are. Plato, in his famous allegory of the cave, described prisoners chained in place, seeing only shadows projected on the wall and believing that to be the entirety of reality. Liberation was painful, but it was the only path to the light. Today you are the prisoner, and the cave is your false self. The shadows are the expectations, inherited beliefs, learned fears, and the exit demands you have enough courage to face the blinding light of truth. The deconstruction of the false self is not an end in itself. It is only the beginning of a much deeper journey, the encounter with the true, silent, untouched essence. And it is towards this encounter that we now move. After deconstruction comes the void, a clean yet still nebulous space where old certainties no longer exist, but the new has not yet been fully found. It is in this unknown territory that the lost essence begins, timidly, to manifest itself. A subtle feeling, almost imperceptible at first, of something that has always been there, but had been suffocated for so long it got used to remaining silent. Here lies the true opportunity to hear for the first time the authentic voice that resides within you. It is not a loud voice like the world's demands. It's a whisper, fragile yet persistent. It does not dictate obligations or impose paths. It merely reveals in flashes of intuition that which makes your heart genuinely vibrate. Jean-Paul Sartre said that the human being is condemned to be free because once conscious of their existence, they cannot escape the responsibility of creating themselves. And that is exactly what happens at this point in the journey. Now you are free to be, but also free to get lost if you lack the courage to stay attentive to this new inner voice. This reconnection with the essence is not a single event. It is built in every choice you make from now on, choosing what truly resonates with you, even if it goes against the current, saying no to what doesn't represent you, even if it costs social approval, acting according to your truth, even if no one else understands it. As you recognize your true essence, you will start to notice a subtle but profound change in how you experience life. Colors seem more vivid, relationships feel more genuine, achievements feel more fulfilling, because they are no longer accomplishments for others' eyes, but intimate celebrations of your authenticity. The essence does not express itself in grand speeches or impressive titles. It reveals itself in how you wake up in the morning, in the sparkle in your eyes when doing what you love, in the serenity born when you no longer need to explain yourself to anyone. Yes, reconnecting with your true essence is the beginning of a lighter, braver life, and above all, a life that is truly yours. And it is precisely with this new awareness that we will now begin to talk about building an authentic existence in the next chapter. Now that you have rediscovered the spark of your true essence, the big question arises: how can you build a life that remains faithful to it? It's not enough to simply recognize who you are at your deepest level. You must translate this discovery into concrete actions, into daily choices, into paths that materialize your truth in the world. Nietzsche, in his philosophy of the eternal return, proposes a radical reflection. Imagine you were condemned to live the same life repeatedly, infinitely, without changing anything. Would you rejoice or despair at the prospect? This brutal question forces us to confront the authenticity of our existence. If you wouldn't be happy to relive your life forever, perhaps you are still living too much for others, for fear, for convenience. Building an authentic life begins with small acts of courage, not necessarily external revolutions, but internal transformations. It's choosing not to say what others expect you to say, but what you truly think. It's accepting the loss of what is superficial to gain what is real. It's understanding that authenticity is not empty rebellion. It's a genuine commitment to what pulses within you. When you align with your essence, your life finds a new axis. Decisions are no longer made out of fear, but guided by meaning. Relationships stop being contracts of emotional dependency and become meetings of freedom and mutual respect. Work ceases to be merely a means of survival and becomes an expression of a deeper purpose. But there is a price. Whenever you dare to live authentically, you will encounter resistance from people who benefited from your conformity, from social structures that prefer predictable individuals, and perhaps even from the parts of yourself that still fear rejection. Here it's necessary to remember the words of Søren Kierkegaard, the philosopher of existence. Becoming who you are demands constant struggle. It's not a final achievement. It's a commitment renewed every day. Living authentically is not about finding a safe refuge. It's about embracing the adventure of being true to yourself in a world that constantly tries to mold you. It's about accepting that in exchange for a truer life, you may lose some battles, some friendships, some certainties. But you will gain something infinitely more valuable: the feeling of finally living in harmony with yourself. And with this foundation, we move on to the next stage, understanding how, by living authentically, you inevitably impact the world around you, even without making a conscious effort, without realizing it. From the moment you begin to live authentically, the world around you also starts to transform. Not because you try to force changes in others, but because your very existence becomes a living invitation to authenticity. Being who you are with honesty, without masks, without artifice, creates an atmosphere that resonates with those who approach you. It's an invisible but profoundly powerful influence. Great existentialist philosophers like Martin Heidegger pointed out that human beings often live in what he called inauthenticity, a way of existing where we let ourselves be carried away by what is done, by what is thought, by what is said, without real questioning. When someone breaks away from this current and starts living genuinely, they inevitably shed light on the inauthentic lives of others. It's uncomfortable for many, but it's also liberating. Without speeches, without proselytizing, your simple presence begins to spark questioning in those who cross your path. Why does this person seem so secure even without following the standards? How do they find meaning without needing everyone's approval? Where does this serenity come from? This silent strength that neither imposes itself nor submits. This impact is what we call silent transformation. You don't need to change the world on a massive scale. You change individual worlds one by one through living example. Your courage to be authentic encourages others to explore their own truths. Your freedom inspires others to seek theirs. Your serenity awakens the longing for inner peace in restless hearts. Perhaps you will never know who was touched by your way of living. Perhaps the seeds you plant will bloom years later in fields you will never see. But that doesn't matter. What matters is that by being true to yourself, you become part of a silent yet irresistible current of transformation. And it is at this point that we must touch upon an even deeper truth. The transformation of the external world is merely a reflection of internal transformation. Changing yourself with honesty is, in fact, the most powerful and effective way to change everything around you. Now, we will dive even deeper. We will talk about how the construction of personal meaning is the true art of freedom, and how the awareness of this process shapes reality itself. As we journey through authenticity and silent transformation, we reach a fundamental revelation. Life does not hand us a ready-made meaning. We must build it ourselves. The meaning of existence is not something to be found like a hidden treasure. It is a work of art that must be created, shaped, and reinvented by each of us. Jean-Paul Sartre, one of the greatest existentialist thinkers, stated, "Man is condemned to be free." This means there is no script, no manual, no external justification that can relieve us of our responsibility. We are thrown into the world, and it is up to us to give meaning to who we are, to what we live, and to what we choose. This freedom is frightening for many, because building one's own meaning requires courage to leave behind all easy explanations, all automatic answers. It requires staring into the void, and instead of retreating, daring to fill it with your own creation. This construction begins with small daily choices. What do you value? What are you willing to fight for? What are you willing to lose in order not to betray what is essential within you? These decisions lay brick by brick the foundation of the artwork that is your life. Nietzsche spoke of the concept of amor fati, the love of one's fate, not in the sense of passive resignation, but as an active, passionate acceptance of everything that makes up your journey. The pains, the losses, the struggles, and the victories. Loving your fate means embracing the totality of your experience, transforming even suffering into an integral part of your construction of meaning. When you choose to consciously build meaning, your life stops being a product of circumstances and becomes an expression of creative freedom. You cease to be a puppet of others' expectations, random events, or social patterns. You become the author, not just the character, of your story. And as your personal meaning solidifies, you discover something extraordinary. No matter the chaos around you, no matter the instability of the outer world, within you there is an anchor, a clarity, a direction that nothing can erase. Now we will explore how this construction of meaning not only brings solidity to your individual existence, but also enables you to face moments of crisis and pain with a strength that feels almost supernatural. The true test comes when chaos knocks at the door. It's not difficult to remain firm while everything is under control, while days flow without major upheavals. But when reality tears the veil of certainties, when the unexpected devours plans, when pain shatters the silence of illusions, that is when who you truly are is revealed. In this brutal setting where most feel lost, the construction of your personal meaning becomes your invisible armor. Those who have consciously shaped their lives are not destroyed by chaos. They are challenged by it. And in that challenge, They reveal a strength that seems impossible to those who merely survive mechanically. The philosopher Viktor Frankl, a survivor of Nazi concentration camps, wrote that those who found personal meaning in their suffering were the ones who managed to endure. His testimony is crystal clear. It is not the absence of suffering that defines human strength, but the ability to give suffering meaning. When you understand this, a profound transformation occurs. Pain ceases to be an insurmountable enemy and becomes raw material for growth. Losses cease to be permanent ruins and become fertile ground for new beginnings. Crisis ceases to be the end and becomes the gateway to a higher level of consciousness. Facing chaos is not blindly fighting against it, nor pretending it doesn't exist. It is dancing with it. It is accepting it as an inevitable part of existence without allowing it to define who you are. It is paradoxically finding stability within instability. The strength that emerges from facing chaos is not loud, not violent, not showy. It is a silent, dense strength, a firm presence that imposes itself without words. It is the kind of strength that the wise have always recognized, even when the world seems to be crumbling. And the most fascinating thing, the more chaos you traverse without losing yourself, the more invulnerable you become. Not invulnerable in the sense of not feeling pain, that would be inhuman, but invulnerable in the sense of no longer being crushed by it. Now we will dive into this powerful silence, the stillness that arises when the mind no longer needs to prove anything, neither to itself nor to the world. As we move closer to the essence of who we truly are, we realize a truth that is both simple and profound. Silence is not empty. It is not the absence of sound. It is not the dead space between words. Silence, when truly understood, is a powerful form of communication, more eloquent and revealing than any word could ever be. In the whirlwind of our daily lives, mental noise is deafening. Thoughts, worries, societal expectations, external pressures all compete for our attention, creating a constant racket that prevents us from hearing the deeper voice inside us. The agitated mind is always trying to control, predict, analyze, and thus we lose touch with what lies beyond words, beyond logical reasoning. And it is exactly in this silent space that the power of true clarity resides. The philosopher Lao Tzu, author of the Tao Te Ching, teaches us that the Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. In other words, the most fundamental things in life cannot be fully captured by language. They must be felt, experienced, and understood in the silence that permeates our existence. When we allow ourselves to dwell in this silence, our perception transforms. Suddenly, we are no longer in a frantic search for answers, but in a state of pure presence. Instead of fighting against uncertainties and challenges, we accept that in the silence of the mind, there is wisdom that goes beyond our ability to comprehend rationally. This silence is not passive. It is full of meaning, full of depth. It is when the mind quiets, effortlessly, without haste, that a new clarity begins to emerge, a deeper understanding of life, of relationships, of what truly matters. In the tranquility of this inner space, the mind is no longer overloaded. It is in a state of creative freedom. Here, the answers do not come from the outside, but from an inner place of trust. When we stop searching desperately, we find what was already present within us. The understanding, the peace, and the certainty that life has a purpose, even when we cannot clearly see it. This is the power of silence. It is not the emptiness that modern culture leads us to believe. It is the space where the true meaning of life begins to be revealed. Now, we will see how this revelation leads us to the final awakening, when you stop being a reflection and become the very essence of what you seek. We have reached the moment of true transformation. After traversing the layers of mental noise, the tensions of chaos, the revealing silence, it is time for the awakening. This is the culminating point of an inner journey that begins with doubt and ends with clarity. The awakening is the revelation of one truth: you are no longer a reflection of external expectations, social standards, or thoughts that were imposed on you. You are the pure essence of who you have always been, without the distortions of the mind that, for so long, tried to tell you who you should be. Philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre spoke about the idea of being for itself, which is the awareness of being something beyond mere objectivity. He argues that we are free, but also responsible for who we become. This concept of freedom is not merely the absence of external restrictions, but the ability to create our own identity without being trapped by what others want us to be. The awakening we speak of here is not a sudden or magical event, but a gradual realization, the discovery that you are the creator of your own life. What happens in this moment of awakening is that you stop being a reflection, a mere replica of what was imposed on you by society, family, or circumstances. You become the active agent of your existence. This means that your choices are now made from a place of deep self-knowledge, no longer like a mirror that only reflects external influences. This is true freedom, to act according to your essence, your most authentic self. This awakening is not something that happens all at once, like an epiphany that instantly changes everything. On the contrary, it is a process of death and rebirth, where parts of who you were fall away to make room for the new. It is the layers of social conditioning, fears, and insecurities that slowly dissolve as you begin to see things as they truly are, not as they were presented to you. However, the most fascinating part of this awakening is that as you become more self-aware, you become more aware of the world around you, not in a fragmented or superficial way, but in an integrated manner, as part of a whole. You realize that you are not an isolated being, but a manifestation of something much larger. The continuous flow of life, which expands and contracts but never loses its totality. And here lies the greatest key. The awakening is ultimately about the integration of mind, body, and soul. It is not about escaping reality, but about embracing it in its entirety, seeing yourself as a being of infinite potential, whose life is not limited by circumstances, but by the possibilities you create. When you see this, you begin to live not as a reflection of your past or the expectations of others, but as the very living expression of your truth. This is the moment of supreme freedom, crystal clear clarity, and a return to your deepest essence. From now on, your journey will no longer be about finding something outside of yourself, but about remembering what you have always been. The awakening is not the end of a search, but the beginning of a new way of living, a life where you are the master of your own narrative, the creator of your own reality.